Hey guys, Britt here. Welcome to End Times Bible Prophecy. Today we're going to talk about a number of headlines, both directly and indirectly related to Bible prophecy. So let's dive right in. This first one is from Business Insider. It's titled, Former U.S. General Says He is Even More Concerned About Putin Using Nukes as Ukraine Makes Astonishing Progress in Its Counteroffensive. Over the course of the nearly 7-month war in Ukraine, Western officials and Russian experts have consistently expressed concerns that Russian President Vladimir Putin may resort to using nuclear weapons if he gets desperate enough. Retired U.S. Army Brigadier General Kevin Ryan, a former defense attaché to Russia and senior fellow at Harvard's Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs, said he's now even more worried about the potential for Putin to tap into Russia's sizable nuclear arsenal because of Ukraine's rapid regaining of territory and a lightning counteroffensive that began less than a month ago. I've been thinking about the pressure Putin must be feeling to do something dramatic, which causes me to think again about nuclear triggers, he told Insider. Ryan said that if the occupied territories of Donetsk and Luhansk asked for a cession into Russia and were accepted, it would mean the fighting that is currently going on in Ukraine will suddenly be in Russia. After failing to take Kyiv, Ukraine's capital, in the early days of the war, Russia shifted its focus to Ukraine's eastern Donbass region, which is made up of Donetsk and Luhansk. Much of the fighting in the war has been in the Donbass. The Biden administration has said Russia may attempt to annex Donetsk and Luhansk via sham referenda. If that happened, there could be immediate ramifications, he said. For one, Putin could solve his military manpower problem because now all the conscripts, 35% plus of the force, can be used since it's no longer a war abroad. A second development will be that the red lines against fighting on Russian territory will be suddenly crossed. NATO weapons will be fighting and shooting inside Russia, and most importantly, the Russian state will be under direct attack. And as we know, that is a trigger for using nuclear weapons. Ryan, who warned as early as March of the potential for Putin to use a small nuclear weapon or tactical nuclear weapon in Ukraine, said he's even more concerned about the possibility of nuclear weapons being used now than he was earlier. If we add the possibility that Russian forces might be losing hard-won territory to Ukrainian forces at the same time, the pressure on Putin to do something dramatic will be enormous. Guys, this is a big deal. We went over this earlier in the week. This is something that really we need to tread carefully. Leaders all around the world need to be very careful about how something like this can spiral out of control. As we saw in World War I, a series of seemingly insignificant events just started to cascade and spiral out of control, and the next thing you know, all the major world powers are engaged in all-out war. And of course, when you have a generation of leaders like ours who, the people in power, the last time we had a major all-out war between major powers was World War II. We've had battles and conflicts and wars and skirmishes since then, but not between the major powers, not directly. And the people who were in power then are no longer in power today. Most of them are still not alive at this point. So you have a generation like that that tends to forget, and they forget the lessons of history, and they make miscalculations. And so on that note, we read this article. It says, Russia-Ukraine war, Medvedev issues apocalyptic warning to the West over Ukraine. And I don't know how seriously Western leaders are taking this, but they should be. It says the former Russia president used a Book of Revelation quote to comment on Kyiv's security treaty demands. So they've put together these demands that would essentially say that if the rest of Ukraine continues to be under attack, that the West would come to its aid. It's almost a de facto NATO treaty that would obligate Western nations to come to Ukraine's defense. So that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about all-out war if something like that goes into place. It says he says Western half-wits from stupid think tanks are leading their countries down the road of nuclear Armageddon with their hybrid war against Moscow, former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev wrote on his Telegram channel on Tuesday. Endlessly funneling weapons and support to Ukraine while pretending not to be directly involved in the conflict will not work, added the deputy chair of the Russia Security Council. So again, this isn't just some former politician. This is one of the closest aides, advisors, and friends and allies of Vladimir Putin. So this is somebody with power making these claims. The security guarantees proposal unveiled by Kyiv on Tuesday was really a prologue to the Third World War, said Medvedev, calling it a hysterical appeal to Western countries engaged in a proxy war against Russia. If the West continues its unrestrained pumping of the Kyiv regime with the most dangerous types of weapons, Russia's military campaign will move to the next level, where visible boundaries and potential predictability of actions by the parties of the conflict will be erased, and the conflict will take on a life of its own, as wars always do, he argued. That's what we were just saying. We were saying these things tend to cascade beyond the control of the leaders to maintain the control of the situation they think they have. So everybody always goes into a war thinking they're going to win. They're going to win quickly. Everything's going to go their way. And very rarely does it work anything like that. And then the Western nations will not be able to sit in their clean homes, laughing at how they carefully weaken Russia by proxy. Everything will be on fire around them. Their people will harvest their grief in full. The land will be on fire, and the concrete will melt, Medvedev wrote, before citing a Bible verse from Revelation 9:18. So this is a very serious threat. Let's look at what Revelation 9:18 says. It says, 1/3 of all the people on earth were killed by these three plagues, by the fire and smoke and burning sulfur that came from the mouths of the horses. So again, this is not restrained language from a very high official from Russia. This is very bellicose language, and it sounds like he does understand history and knows how these things can escalate and get out of control quickly. And I wonder how many of our leaders truly understand that again, when you look throughout history, a lot of the wars, the most destructive wars in history, were started by people who had misconceptions about how the war would go, how quickly it would go, what the outcome would be, what the cost of that war would be, and they went down the road too far and they lost control, and everybody else pays the price. So I hope that that's not what happens here, but we are living in the season of the Lord's return, so we know that the tribulation is very near. Is this a prelude to the tribulation and some of the destruction we read about right here in Revelation 9:18? Medvedev is directly quoting it, so I don't know that we could have a bigger wake-up call than a world leader directly quoting this verse and talking about using weapons with immense destructive power, weapons that have never been used before. When we talk about nuclear weapons that were used in World War II, they are nothing compared to what is available today. And so this is a very serious situation. Hopefully we can back down from this situation. But as Revelation tells us, eventually something bad's going to happen. So on to this. This is from the Washington Examiner. It says, Xi to Putin, we are ready to team up with our Russian colleagues. This says, Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese leader Xi Jinping met in Uzbekistan, where they reaffirmed their commitment to strengthening their relationship and putting their mark on the global scale. In the face of the colossal changes of our time on a global scale, unprecedented in recent history, we are ready to team up with our Russian colleagues to set an example of a responsible world power and to play a leading role in putting a rapidly changing world on the track of sustainable and positive development, Xi told Putin. Now, guys, this is yet another sign of this China-Russia axis that we've talked about before. This is not by chance. I think that clearly China understands the repercussions of siding with Russia in the face of Western sanctions, in the face of the West war by proxy, and all of the sanctions they've put in place on Russia over the war in Ukraine. And I believe Putin went into that war in Ukraine knowing that China had Russia's back. And the purpose of the war in Ukraine is not to take territory in Ukraine, but it is to destroy the Western financial system. So this is not a conventional war. It's not a nuclear war. Hopefully it won't become one, but it is clearly a financial war. And we've seen with the shutdowns in China that have taken place, I believe that's part of that financial war, is to keep supplies from going to the Western powers. And we've seen with what's happened with Russia's invasion of Ukraine to energy and food supplies. And I believe the purpose is to crash the Western financial system and to replace that with some sort of new monetary system, have a bipolar world where you have the West and its allies, China and Russia and their allies, and China and Russia can have greater control over their future destiny because they want to get out of this dollar-dominated Western financial system. They want to rid themselves of it. And you can read that here in this article when he was talking about ready to team up and be a responsible world power and a rapidly changing world. And there have been speeches in the recent past from both Putin and Xi talking about the dollar and the impact of the dollar and getting adequate trade for what they are supplying to the world in terms of commodities and manufactured products. So this is, again, one to keep an eye on. This alliance is a very formidable alliance aligned against the West. Now, again, it's a financial war, but what is the future of warfare? Because I believe that there will be a direct conflict between the major powers in the near future. And this article from Zero Hedge, I think, gives us a glimpse of what that future war will look like. It says, watch, U.S. Army conducts drone swarm exercise with armed quadcopters, while unmanned aerial vehicles such as the multi-million-dollar General Atomics MQ-1 Predator are armed with missiles. A new generation of inexpensive kamikaze drones is reshaping the battlefield. The U.S. military worries that these low-cost and deadly effective drones could shift the global strategic balance away from the U.S. on the modern battlefield. To counter such emerging threats, the Army decided to conduct a field training exercise involving a swarm of 40 quadcopters, all equipped with cameras, miles, and lethal munition. Now, miles is it's a laser guiding system used for training purposes where basically they're equipping these drones with the lasers, and they'll be able to show if this was a live fire, real world example, then those lasers would be indicative of the damage done by the drones in this situation. So it says, tweeted the commanding general of the National Training Center in Fort Irwin. The startling video tweeted on Sunday evening shows the quadcopters zooming by what appears to be a makeshift desert town. There was no confirmation on location, though it could have been at the Fort Irwin training facility in Southern California. There was also no confirmation on when the training exercise was conducted. It says at sunrise this morning, a swarm of 40 quadcopters, all equipped with cameras, miles, and lethal munition capable Launched in advance of the 11th ACR's attack on a prepared defense by 1AD drones will be as important in the first battle of the next war as artillery is today. So let's take a look at this. I don't know how much of an indication this gives of a future war. You can see these 40 drones flying by. What I want you to imagine as we look at that clip is, imagine those are armed. You know, it reminds me a lot of films of Pearl Harbor when you see the swarm come over the town. And you think a lot of these swarms, they'll have the ability to evade radar because they fly at low levels. And he talks about drones will be as important in the first battle of the next war as artillery is today. Imagine, these things are only going to get smaller. They're going to get more powerful. They're going to get smarter. The artificial intelligence systems that can control them and coordinate among them and communicate among the swarm are only going to get better. So take what we just saw and multiply that by thousands, by millions. Make those drones smaller. How would a modern military, which uses, as it said early on, missiles are attached to a lot of the drones they use today. You can fire a missile at a swarm of thousands of drones, small drones. You might take out a few of them, but it's not really going to have that much of an impact. But what happens if you have an encampment and thousands or millions of these things move in and just attack your people, your personnel? How do you defend against that? That's the future of warfare. That's what modern militaries need to figure out. But what happens in the meantime is this creates a destabilizing environment where you don't know where this next surprise Pearl Harbor type attack is going to come. And I think that when it does come, it will be in the form of AI-controlled drone swarms, of which this was more of a rudimentary example. But that, again, they're going to get smaller, smarter, faster, more intelligent across the board. It's going to increase exponentially, and that is going to create a situation where mutually assured destruction is no longer applicable. And there is a world power that thinks that they can strike and win against major powers, against major nuclear powers. So this is a destabilizing event. We're seeing the beginnings of it. We've warned about this before. I wrote about this extensively in my book, Racing Toward Armageddon. And now we're seeing it come to fruition. We're seeing this come to being. So this one we'll definitely keep a lookout on, because, as I've said before, once that event happens, the leading power has to use it to conquer the world. Because if they do not, it creates an inherently unstable arms race that would eventually destroy the world. And so regardless of the intention of the power that develops these AI systems, molecular manufacturing, quantum computing to build swarms of the magnitude it would take to overcome mutually assured destruction, regardless of their intent, they must use it to conquer the world. And of course, we know from the book of Revelation that there is a major war, Revelation 6, war and slaughter everywhere, and it ends when all the dust settles. One man controls the entire earth. And we could see with these types of weapon systems exactly how that could happen. So our next story, this one is from CNBC. It says FedEx CEO says he expects the economy to enter a worldwide recession. FedEx CEO Raj Subramaniam told CNBC's Jim Cramer on Thursday that he believes a recession is impending for the global economy. I think so, but you know, these numbers, they don't portend very well, he said in response to Cramer's question of whether the economy is going into a worldwide recession. The CEO's pessimism came after FedEx missed estimates on revenue and earnings for its first quarter. I'm very disappointed in the results that we just announced here. And you know, the headline really is the macro situation we're facing, he said. And then he goes on and says, we're seeing that the volume decline in every segment around the world. And so, you know, we just started our second quarter. The weekly numbers are not looking so good. So we just assume at this point that the economic conditions are not really good. We are a reflection of everybody else's business, especially the high-value economy in the world, he later added. So many people see FedEx as a bellwether, as an early indicator of how the global economy is going to do, or how the global economy is doing at the moment, because if the economy is going well, people are shipping lots of products, they're using FedEx's services. But if the economy is not going so well, they use less of their services. So in the past, people have looked to FedEx as an indicator of how the global economy is doing. I don't think it's doing so well right now. And that leads us into this next article. This is from Yahoo Finance. It says, Europe's energy crisis needs immediate action or else the economy will come to a full stop, says Belgian Prime Minister. The European Union must take immediate action to address the energy crisis or else face dire economic consequences, according to the Belgian Prime Minister. A few weeks like this and the European economy would just go into a full stop, he told Bloomberg. Recovering from that is going to be much more complicated than intervening in gas markets today. The risk of that is in deindustrialization and severe risk of fundamental social unrest. What we are seeing today is a massive drainage of prosperity out of the European Union. I think we don't have the space to again say, okay, we put something in the text and then we meet each other in 2 months. In 2 months with these prices, I fear it's too late. So think about that. Here you have the Prime Minister of Belgium saying these high energy prices, we need to stop talking about stuff. We don't have 2 months to wait. We can't put these plans on paper and not do anything, and it'll be too late. The economy is going to completely shut down. A full stop is what he called it. And I believe he's absolutely right. Where I think he is wrong is when he thinks that putting anything on paper or anything that they're going to do today is going to change that. I think the full stop is inevitable because, again, unless there's a complete capitulation to Russia's demands and Russia turns back on the natural gas and the energy starts flowing again, the European Union is not going to have the energy it needs to warm its people in the winter time and run its industrial economy at the same time. There's not enough energy, and there's nothing any of the politicians in Europe can do to create more energy. And they can try to import more, but that's coming from somewhere. And we're already seeing articles about rising natural gas prices in the United States as they look to export liquefied natural gas to the EU to support them, but that just drives up the price for the US economy. So globally, we're looking at a global economy that is in a definite slowdown, and I believe in Europe in the not too distant future it will come to a full stop. We've talked before about a Lehman moment. I think we're going to have that here probably in the next 6 weeks or so, where something somewhere in the economy breaks and it's too big to be bailed out by the government. They can no longer kick the can down the road. They can no longer paper over it with promises because there is nothing the government can do to create more energy. And that's the situation we're in, and as the Belgian Prime Minister warned, that could lead to great social unrest. And so from a biblical perspective, where does that social unrest lead, particularly in Europe, where we know the Antichrist is likely to arise from within the European Union? We just watched a video that gave us some insight into the future of warfare and talking about these developing technologies that will have to be used to conquer the world. We're reading about Medvedev quoting the book of Revelation and his threats to the West. So we live in a time where I believe we are on the threshold of seeing the events of the tribulation play out. Now, how soon that is, if it's a matter of weeks, months, years, I don't know. I don't have the answers to that, but I know that we live in the season of the Lord's return right now. And so the rapture is imminent. It's always imminent, but it has to be closer now than it's ever been before, because we know that the rapture of the church occurs before the tribulation. So as we see that tribulation time period approach, we know that Jesus will be coming for his church. That's what he told us in Luke 21:28. He said, when you see all these things converge, know that I'm right at the door. My return is near. So we know that this is the season of the Lord's return, guys. So we should be taking every moment we have. We should be taking full advantage of that to spread the gospel, share the gospel with others, and let other people know about the good news of Jesus Christ, because he is our joy, and he is what keeps us through these times of peril and bad news and tribulation. Our hope is in Jesus. So guys, like this, share this, and God willing, we'll talk on Monday. Bye. If you want to learn more about the end times and Bible prophecy, make sure to sign up for my free monthly newsletter and get your copy of my free ebook, 7 Signs of the End Times. Just follow the link in the description to get your free book. Also, make sure to check out all of my books. Just look up Britt on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple iBooks, Google Books, Kobo, or anywhere books are sold. Thanks for watching today, and until next time, keep your eyes fixed on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith.